Hello, fellow bibliophiles, and welcome back to Blatantly Bookish. I'm Marissa, and today I'd like to talk about the books that I read in the month of January. It was a pretty great reading month. I read some children's fiction, some contemporary fiction, and some classics, although there are some unpopular opinions on here, so let's get on to the books. The first book I finished in the month of January was The Golden Compass by Philip Pullman. I have never read the His Dark Materials series before, but I know that it is well beloved on BookTube, and I had found and purchased a gorgeous, complete set of the trilogy for $1 a book at a local library sale a while back. I don't know what finally made me pick up this series, but I'm glad I did. This book was absolutely amazing, and it's an example of what children's fiction should aspire to. It centers around 9-year-old Lyra, a brave and free-thinking girl who's an orphan and lives amongst academics in Oxford's Jordan College. Lyra's uncle comes to visit, and Lyra overhears him discussing his scientific findings with the scholars. From the far north, he shows pictures of a mysterious celestial phenomenon called dust. And Lyra, curious by nature, gets sucked into the danger of this mystery and caught up in a struggle involving stolen children, witch clans, and an armored bear. Pullman deftly creates a world that is both altogether believable and familiar, yet interesting and clearly distinct from our own. He demonstrates beautiful characterization of the Panzerbjorn, or armored bears, and how they're distinct from humanity, and he convincingly makes us believe in this concept of demon companions. In this world, everyone has a demon companion in animal form, something so profoundly connected with them that the two are almost a part of the same soul. Children's demons constantly change form to suit the child's needs, but as one ages, their demon settles into a more permanent form, an animal that best represents who they are as a person. This book has a wonderful dichotomy between children and adults, where the children are actually sometimes more astute and knowledgeable than the adults are. It's a hallmark of children's literature to have some sort of dichotomy or misunderstanding between children and adults, but this book takes that a step further by playing on the concept of original sin. This is a book for all ages, really, and explores powerful themes of science, religion, morality, and the existence of a soul. On top of all that, it is beautifully written, with some particularly gorgeous passages about the cold and the aurora. It has great characters, and I can't wait to delve into this world again soon, hopefully, by picking up the second book in the trilogy. The next book I finished was Convenience Store Woman by Sayaka Murata. I enjoyed it, but it was a very strange read. It's about Keiko Furukura, a convenience store worker. Keiko has never fit into mainstream society. She was a strange child, and her family worried about how she would assimilate into the world, so they are delighted when she takes a job at a convenience store. But at 36, she is still a lonely convenience store worker. She's never had a boyfriend, and she only has ever had a few friends. She finds meaning in her job as a way to fit in with society, but at the same time, she's painfully aware that her friends and family worry about her, and that she's not living up to society's expectations of adulthood. She lives by the convenience store's manual and copies her coworkers' fashion sense and speech patterns so she can play the part of a normal person. Keiko lives by the routine of the convenience store, and when that store hires a new coworker, she has to cope with his disruption of her quiet existence. Keiko is one of the most peculiar characters I've ever read about in literature. Her complete lack of understanding of human emotion, combined with her desire not to disappoint those around her, fascinates me. She wants so desperately to conform to society's expectations, to alleviate the worry of her friends and family, and get them to stop nagging her. But she doesn't really want the things that they do for her. She doesn't want to get married or have kids or advance in a career of any type. She's bizarrely content in the order that the convenience store provides for her. Besides pleasing others and passing as normal, it's unclear what Keiko actually wants or who she even is apart from the convenience store worker persona that she's created for herself. I read her at times as on the autistic spectrum, but there was a violent story she recounts from childhood that made me suspect that she was a psychopath. But would a psychopath care so much about being a useful part of society? Unraveling the character of Keiko has kept me interested and entertained by this book, but its plot and writing left something to be desired. It has a very loose plot, with not much that actually takes place. It's almost more of a character study, which I didn't really mind too much because, like I said, the character of Keiko is fascinating. But the writing was a bit awkward and unnatural at times. It's possible that my issues with the writing stemmed from the fact that it was originally written in Japanese and later translated into English. Or it's quite possible that the awkward nature of the writing was intentional and meant to reflect Keiko's awkward and unnerving character. Either way, the book was a bit bizarre, yet I'm very glad that I read it. I also read Little Men by Louisa May Alcott in January. Joe is all grown up and runs the Plumfield School for Boys in Aunt March's old house with the help of Professor Bear. The school is a haven for orphaned and downtrodden boys and aims to make them morally responsible young men. There are about 12 assorted boys, a wayward tomboy named Nan, and all of the March sisters' children running about the school. It's mostly told from the boys' point of view, but I found it difficult to connect with the characters simply because there were so many of them. The most featured and therefore the most memorable boys for me were Nat, Dan, Tommy, and Demi. But it's hard to get that same sense of connection that you do in Little Women with this new cast of characters. I still really loved Nat's storyline of finding a sense of belonging and community and family in Plumfield, and I also loved Dan's complexity of character and the relationship between him and Teddy. The book did have some interesting perspectives on education and raising children, but it also didn't age so well in many ways. The most striking example of this for me is how, when Nan gets lost in the woods, Joe ties her up to the bedpost as punishment. It's not exactly good modern-day parenting or school teacher behavior. I also didn't care for the character of Joe in this book. I wasn't a fan of her ending in Little Women, so I had no desire to witness her married life. She's revered in Little Women for her tomboyishness, her wit, and her spirit, but in Little Men she is almost thoroughly domesticated and tamed. Some say that she retains a bit of her childhood self in her interactions with the boys and is still a strong female character in the role she takes within the school. I don't necessarily view her portrayal in this book as a departure from her character, but I still don't like how she's evolved as a person. While she still lives a less conventional life than her sisters, she still conforms too much to society's gendered expectations for my modern-day sensibilities. I keep asking myself, would there be any version of this sequel that I'd like? And I'm not really sure there would be. I personally don't like that Joe married at all, so continuing forward with the March sisters was just bound to disappoint me. This is the sequel I never needed, and learning that Louisa May Alcott only wrote this after the death of her brother-in-law out of financial necessity to support her sister's family made me appreciate this book even more. I don't usually give much stock to biographical readings, but in Louisa May Alcott's case, I found that her biographical information adds a depth of meaning to Little Women, and apparently this holds true for its sequel as well. The fact that I didn't absolutely hate this book speaks to Louisa May Alcott's talent as a writer. And I'll probably try to read the third book in the series just to give her due credit. And last but not least, in January, I read Madame Bovary by Gustave Flaubert. I read this book as a buddy read with Katie from Books and Things and Jenny from Bookish Shenanigans. It was so fun discussing everything with them, but unfortunately, this book did not live up to my expectations at all. It's a well-renowned classic that has survived many generations, but I just wasn't impressed with it. It's about Charles and Emma Bovary, a married couple, and the consequences of Emma's aspirations, boredom, and subsequent adultery. I could not connect to any of the characters in this book, and it wasn't simply that I disliked them. There are so many dislikable characters that I still enjoy reading about. I even discussed one in this video already. I didn't like or particularly identify with Keiko from The Convenience Store Woman, but I found her fascinating to dissect and to think about. Charles and Emma weren't unlikable in a fascinating way. They just bored me. I found them to be quite dull, and I found the writing to be paced strangely as well. Important life milestones were glossed over with a sentence or two, and then there are sections of in-depth exposition on things that hardly seem to matter to the story. I thought it may have just been my translation of the book, but Katie and Jenny seemed to feel pretty similarly to me, despite having different translations. I think that this book might be interesting to study or to write an essay on for school. It does have interesting themes, but it just wasn't enjoyable, meaningful, or memorable to me, and I'd really like to stop talking about it now. So that was all I read in the month of January. I thought it was a very interesting reading month, despite having some pretty critical views of much of what I read. Have you read any of these books? If so, what did you think of them? Is my view of Madame Bovary unusual and unpopular? What do you think of the sequels of The Golden Compass and Little Men? Because hopefully I'll be reading those soon. What was your favorite book that you read in January? I'd love to hear your thoughts about anything and everything bookish in the comments section down below. And until next time, I look forward to seeing you in another video very soon. Bye!